Hello, wonderful people of the internet. My name is Matthew. Thank you for coming to my channel. Matthew talks about American literature and more. And today, we're going to be discussing Scarlet Letter. This is undoubtedly one of the most iconic books in American history. For those of you who don't know, it was written by Nathaniel Hawthorne, an early Romantic American author, one of the first major American novelists, along with James Fenimore Cooper. He was also a friend of Herman Melville, who he greatly influenced, and this book specifically had a great influence on him. And this book tells the story of Hester Prynne, who lives in the Puritan community in New England and has given birth to a child out of wedlock, but comes to discover that her former husband has returned and is going to have to deal with all the trials and tribulations that come with it. Now, let me give you my initial impressions. I really like this book. It's not a perfect book, but I can understand why this book and this story has such a tremendous impact on American literature and indeed world literature so far. First of all, let's talk about the story. The story of the Scarlet Letter is so iconic. A woman commits adultery, a child is born out of wedlock, and hijinks ensue. The person who she fathered the child, which I'm not going to spoil, it's not a big mystery in the book, but I love how Hester Prynne is portrayed as this very strong, developed, courageous woman who does her best for her child, Pearl, who is also a great character with phenomenal development. Initially an elf, but learns through the love of someone I won't name to become a more mature, normal child. In this book, Hester Prynne is forced to wear the Scarlet Letter, a red A, on her breast, and as an act of self-penance, of humiliation. And what I love about this is that even though that sounds kind of ridiculous to our modern eyes, Hawthorne treats this act with enough of a halcyon glow to symbolize the A as almost like a mark of shame, but as a mark of not just shame, but emotional taxation. In addition, this story includes one of the best villains I have ever seen in literature, Roger Chillingworth. He was Hester Prynne's original husband, who was thought to be lost at sea, but has come back to supposedly reunite with his wife, but to seek revenge on the father of her daughter, Pearl. This character in particular stole every scene he's in. And what I love about him is that, one, he is not so much a stereotypical villain where he twirls his mustache. They give him a good amount of humanity, and he acts at more of a psychological villain, acting kind of like the devil on someone's shoulder, and constantly tormenting both the father of Pearl, Hester Prynne, by the knowledge that he is now in a quest for revenge. In addition, he is given a sense of humanity. While this book is clearly written in the Romantic era of classical literature where emotions and feelings take paramount, while he's portrayed as a cold-hearted man, they give him enough development to show that even though soulful warmth doesn't come naturally to him, there is an analytical knowledge that there is a right and wrong, and that this mission has corrupted him, which I just thought was fantastic. And the individual, who I'm not going to name, but is the father of Pearl, Hester Prynne's daughter, I thought gave an incredibly nuanced view on psychological torture. Now, this is again in the Romantic period of classical literature, so the way that this manifests, especially in the third act, may be over the top and melodramatic to some, but I thought it worked. Now we have to get on to the mixed. Like I said, that this book is notorious for being not so much melodramatic, but steeped in the Romance era of classical literature. And I felt that while this book does do a good job at foreshadowing or like giving enough implication of what happens before the events of the book, I felt that this book could have used a chapter or a section of, or a flashback of some kind that gave more context to each of the individual characters' motivations and make them more fleshed out. They're incredible characters on their own right, but I felt that a more context could have made the emotion and the character decisions hit much harder. Lastly, another thing that I'm mixed on is Nathaniel Hawthorne's writing style. Now, as many of you know, that classic books tend to have tend to lean to more archaic language. And Hawthorne and many other early American writers and Augustan era writers are known for having long sentences with like 5 clauses per sentences, multiple commas. And while Nathaniel Hawthorne was a short story writer, and after reading this book, I'd be interested in reading some of his short stories, does do a good job keeping the pace up, given the very archaic language. There were sections where, while I got used to it after like the first 20 pages of the narrative, there were sections where like, okay, this prose style is too dense. I'm going to have to reread this, especially long sections where he describes the Puritan community or descriptions of nature, which, while they did flow for me to some extent, were parts of the book where I felt that it took me out of the narrative and affected my enjoyment. The last part of the book that is a straight up negative is that this book is 240 pages, and the first 40 pages are literally a custom house, which serves as a prologue and a narrative framing story of how everything with Hester Prynne, Pearl, Roger Chillingworth, the father of her child, takes place. And it's essentially a short story that has an author character that is a stand-in for Nathaniel Hawthorne himself, dictating how he found records of Hester Prynne and semi-fictionalized the account that's in this book. I will say that it is well written enough that it does make me interested in Nathaniel Hawthorne's short stories, I would recommend reading it if you're feeling intimidated by Hawthorne's writing style and just to get used to it. But that entire section could be straight up deleted or at least condensed down to 1 or 2 pages, and it wouldn't have affected the narrative story at all. So that just means that's just a pretty big criticism when 1/6 of the book is functionally irrelevant and not just a drag on the story and the page count. But other than that, and I probably will skip that on a reread, but other than that, I really enjoyed the Scarlet Letter. There are some aspects of it that are dated, of course, like I've mentioned before, but the story is iconic for a reason, and I would suggest that anyone who's interested in classical literature can tolerate a more antique writing style and is interested in a short, pretty gripping, albeit somewhat dense and repetitive, classic of the early American Romantic period. By all means, give the Scarlet Letter a shot. 4.5 out of 5. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope this video finds you well, and happy reading.